Good morning and welcome to the Morning Report. My name is Willie Lawson. Hey, listen, this whole shutdown thing. First of all, if you've been with me for a while, I am for every government shutdown, uh, because hopefully it will give us a chance to reevaluate some stuff because we have essential and non-essential. So if there is non-essential, what if we just don't have non-essential? But anyway, that's for another video. Because there's a moment in every political cycle when rhetoric and reality collide. When that happens, voters are given a rare glimpse behind the curtain. Not because politicians suddenly become honest, because they don't, because we don't want honest, uh, but because contradiction becomes too large to hide. That's exactly what's happening right now, with Democrats threatening a government shutdown over ICE operations in Minnesota. On the surface, the story is being sold as dramatic. Democrats are taking a stand, willing to shut down the government to stop what they describe as abusive or excessive immigration enforcement. Activists cheer, yay! Headlines follow. Social media lights up. The narrative feels bold, confrontational, even principled. But here's the problem: ICE operations in Minnesota will almost certainly continue, even if the government shuts down. And you know what? Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer know it. Which raises a far more uncomfortable question. If the outcome doesn't change, then why is the shutdown threat? What's it really about? The answer isn't policy, it's politics. So, to understand what's happening, we have to strip away the emotional language and look at the structure of government, the nature of shutdowns, and the incentives driving elected officials as midterm elections approach. First, a reality check. ICE is not some optional federal program that quietly disappears during a shutdown. Immigration and Customs Enforcement is part of the Department of Homeland Security, and its core enforcement mission is classified as essential government activity. Essential government activity. Say it with me: essential government activity, with the word essential being the most important one. That means ICE agents remain on duty. Detention continues, arrests continue, deportations continue. The machinery of enforcement does not grind to a halt simply because Congress fails to pass a spending bill. Now, this isn't speculation. We've seen it before. During previous shutdowns, ICE continued operating. Border enforcement continued, criminal alien removals continued. What pauses are non essential administrative functions. You get paperwork delays, non detained court hearings, um, optional services, not boots on the ground. So, what the shutdown actually can do is they can make it harder to process people later because all the paperwork shuts down. But the enforcement continues. So when Democrats threaten to shut down to stop ICE, they're making a threat that doesn't actually achieve the stated goal. That's not a bug in the strategy. That's the strategy. This shutdown threat is best understood not as leverage over policy, but as narrative theater designed to satisfy political constituencies without changing enforcement realities. There are three audiences this message is aimed at. Okay. The first is the progressive activist base. These are voters, donors, and organizations that demand visible resistance to immigration enforcement, regardless of whether the resistance is effective. For this audience, symbolism matters more than results. The shutdown threat signals defiance. It allows politicians to say, "We fought ICE, even if ICE continues operating the next morning. We fucked them." In politics, being seen fighting often matters more than winning, especially when the base is emotionally invested and policy details are inconvenient. The second audience is the midterm voters within the Democrat coalition. Turnout is a lifeblood of off-year elections because nothing energizes a base like conflict. A shutdown fight allows Democrats to frame Republicans as extremists who chose ICE over the government. ICE is the government, right? It simplifies the story. It avoids nuance and creates a villain. But the ICE operations continue is irrelevant to the messaging. What matters is that who can be blamed when things get messy. The third audience is state and local officials in places like Minnesota. Democrat governors, mayors, and legislators facing pressure from activist groups want federal allies to appear supportive, even when allies lack the power or the willingness to change enforcement policy. A shutdown threat creates the appearance of solidarity without assuming responsibility for the outcome, which is typical. It's political insulation. So what this is not is a serious attempt to alter immigration enforcement in Minnesota. If Democrats truly believe a shutdown would stop ICE operations, they would be mistaken. But the more honest assessment is that they already know better. We like to say that I hear this from people on the right all the time. They're so stupid. They're not stupid. They know. It's worse than them being ignorant or stupid. They're dishonest. They know that. Every time politicians threaten extreme measures, knowing the practical outcome won't change, they erode public confidence. Voters are told one thing, we're stopping ICE, and then observe something entirely different. ICE arrests continue as usual. Over time, people will stop listening, or worse, stop believing anything they're told. That credibility gap matters, especially when working class voters and moderates who may support immigration enforcement but dislike chaos and dysfunction and government shutdowns. These voters don't live in activist echo chambers. They live in the real world with the rest of us, where government failure has consequences. There's also a profound irony embedded in this moment. By elevating ICE into a showdown, Democrats are implicitly implying ICE is effective. No one threatens to shut down the government over an agency that doesn't matter. Okay. No one risks economic disruption over a symbolic office with no real impact. The intensity of the response suggests ICE is doing exactly what it's designed to do: enforce immigration law in a way that disrupts illegal networks and illegal residency. That effectiveness is what scares the activists. And instead of confronting that reality honestly, politicians choose performance, as they do. And that's where we have a responsibility for clarity. A government shutdown would hurt ordinary Americans long before it hurts ICE. Federal workers miss paychecks. We've already been through that. Contractors stall and their contracts stall, and the people who work for them don't get paid. Services slow down. The markets get weird for little or no reason. Families feel it. Meanwhile, ICE agents report for duty as usual. That asymmetry tells you everything you need to know about the sincerity of the threat. So I keep pushing it? Well, because in modern politics, chaos is often seen as a feature, not a flaw. A shutdown creates headlines. It forces attention. It allows politicians to campaign from cable news studios instead of explaining policy details to voters who might ask the uncomfortable questions. It also allows Democrats to avoid the harder conversation. If they oppose immigration enforcement, they must explain what replaces it. We always say here, when there's a tax cut, so what's going to replace that money? So if you're not going to enforce immigration laws, then what do you plan on doing? Border anarchy polls poorly. Sanctuary rhetoric collapses under the scrutiny. Voters may sympathize with migrants while still demanding order. That tension is politically dangerous. A shutdown threat sidesteps the issues entirely. So instead of saying, we oppose enforcement and accept the consequences, politicians say, Republicans forced this crisis. Responsibility is outsourced, accountability avoided. From a strategic standpoint, this is risky because voters are more informed than they used to be because you are watching this. Independent media are explaining the mechanics in real time. The old trick of blaming the other side while quietly accepting the outcome doesn't work as well when people can see enforcement continuing despite the noise. There is also a long-term institutional damage to consider. Using shutdown threats as a routine political tool degrades the credibility of Congress itself. When shutdowns become performative rather than substantive, the public begins to see them as tantrums rather than principled stands. That cynicism doesn't help democracy. It fuels the disengagement. And disengaged voters don't reward the party in power. Ultimately, the question isn't whether Democrats are posturing. The evidence strongly suggests that they are. We all know that they are. But the deeper question is whether voters will continue accepting theater in place of truth. ICE operations in Minnesota will likely continue. That's the reality. Everything else is messaging layered on top of it. We're here to cut through the fog. When politicians threaten drastic actions knowing that the result won't change, it's our job to say so plainly. Not emotionally, not hysterically, but clearly. This shutdown threat isn't about stopping ICE. It's about managing optics, motivating donors, and shaping midterm narratives. That doesn't make it harmless. It makes it dishonest. And frankly, Americans deserve better than that. My name is Willie Lawson. This has been the Morning Report. Until we see you again, go out there and learn something, love somebody, and for goodness sakes, God take care of yourself. We will see you when we see you. Bye-bye now.